happens after you've lost a loved one to suicide? What's next? Where can you go to talk or to be with other people who know exactly what you're going through? On this edition of Healthy Living, we will finish our discussion on suicide. Stay with us and learn about the local and national support groups that are available to help you. In the first part of our series on suicide, the question was, what are the warning signs and risk factors of suicide? On the second part of our discussion, the question was, how do family members and friends deal with the loss of a loved one to suicide? On this final part of our discussion on suicide, the question is, what's next? Where do you go to talk and to be with others who know what you're going through? Here to help me talk about that are Jennifer Lewis and Sharee Dawn Roberts. Jennifer, on the first two shows, the statistic that I quoted is that 90% of suicides are a result of untreated depression. And N.A.M.I, which is the group that you are president of, is trying to change those statistics. So just tell me, what is N.A.M.I?
Well, N.A.M.I is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it is a national grassroots organization. I think it started back in '79. It's support, education, and advocacy. And we have signature programs, one of which is family to family. And families who have people with a mental illness talk to other families that have a mental illness. It's a 12-week course. You meet for 2.5 hours once a week, and they tell you, they educate you on mental illnesses so that as a family member, you know what your family member is going through. They teach you about how to communicate with them. They tell you about all the medicines. They tell you side effects you can look for. They tell you how to take care of yourself.
So it's families talking to families, because I've found from personal experience that when you're going through a tough time, when people who don't know what you're going through try to talk to you, it doesn't ring true. And you just kind of block those people out because they don't understand. But when you have someone who does understand, like a family member who has someone with mental illness,
right,
it's easier to listen to them.
It is easier to listen to them, and they have great role playing so that you can understand what's going on in the mind of your loved one who's hearing voices or who's believes things that aren't so, like the television's talking to them or the radio is sending them signals from God. So it sounds sort of absurd, but it's a wonderful class, and N.A.M.I has this class, and it's the same all over the country. And they have other programs, and when we have volunteers who are willing to take the training, we do statewide trainings. We have an In Our Own Voice program where people with mental illness learn to tell their story, and they'll come up in pairs. It's mixed with a videotape, and so they tell their stories in conjunction with the tape, and so they can go around to groups and tell other people with mental illness what their story is, what their mental illness is like, how they came to recovery.
Okay. So you said it's a national organization,
yes,
but it's also local,
it's
which
local.
Is you represent, you're the president of the local chapter.
Yes.
How did it begin here in Paducah?
Well, it started in '86, and I don't know all the ins and outs. I came here about 2.5 years ago because I needed help. I had questions about insurance, and I found this little group that was trying to rebound. They had been sort of stagnant for a while, and a couple had come into town, Paul and Marcia Garrett from North Carolina, a little before I did, and they had helped start the group in North Carolina. And they brought in a lot of life and a lot of zest, and I came in, I said, well, I can hand out flyers. So that's how I started with N.A.M.I. And then I took the family to family class. because not only am I a consumer, but I also have 2 children that have untreated mental illness.
Okay, consumer. What does that mean?
Well, it's really a euphemism. I have a mental illness, and I consume services. And people don't like to go around and say, I have a mental illness. They think you're dangerous. They think you're stupid, that you're mentally retarded. They think you're less capable than other folks. It's a big stigma. It scares people. We scare people until you get to know one of us or 2 of us or a handful, and you see that we're just like everybody else.
Well, and here's an example of that. I met you a few days ago before we did this show. I had no idea that you had a mental illness. I just assumed you're the president of N.A.M.I, that's what that was about. And until this moment that you said that you were a consumer of the mental illness, the services, I had no idea. But when you tell people that, do you feel like they change?
Well, no, I don't. The only people really I tell, because there's really no need for Tom, Dick, and Harry to, I don't have to wear a sign, though I do when we have our N.A.M.I walks. We have statewide walks in Lexington. We've had our 3rd one this year. The governor was there. He was beating the drum. He was our
advocate.
Yes. He and his wife co-chairs this year for the walk.
So that's another program or another event that you do to
Yes.
bring awareness about mental illness.
We took 63 people with the help of 4 Rivers. They get up a team and we joined them, and 63 of us, I think was the final number, ended up in Lexington with our T-shirts and our banners and our balloons, and we had a great day, and we walked in the name of mental illness.
Okay. And that walk isn't the only walk that is done. There's a walk that deals with Zack's Hope and the suicide support group. There are other walks that go on to help bring about awareness not only of mental illness, but of one of the results of mental illness, which is suicide. And with me again is Sharee Dawn Roberts, and Sharee was on the second part of the show as a suicide survivor, which is kind of a misnomer, because when you hear that you think that possibly you had tried to commit suicide and that you survived it, but that's not what it is. It's that you are a family member who's lost someone to suicide. Just recap your story just briefly for me, Sharee, to tell me what's brought you into your next phase, which is your Zack's Hope, which we'll get to.
Into Zack's Hope.
Well, your story of
yes,
your
and you're right about the word survivor. It can be misleading. And when I first heard it, I certainly didn't feel like a survivor. But once getting the Zack's Hope suicide prevention started was actually not a conscious, deliberate, intellectual effort on my part. It kind of just unfolded and happened, and the way it came about, I was starting to get better. Okay, it had been 2.5 years since I had lost my son Zack to suicide. Then that was 2004, and I started wanting to get back into the mainstream, because really up until then I had removed myself, but I didn't feel quite strong enough yet to go back to my old career, and so I look back now in circumstances, and I call them serendipity actually, and when you start paying attention to them, it's very odd how it came about. I'm an artist, and I hadn't gone back to my art yet, but I had kept in contact with the cooperative ministry, and Abrams Hall is a segment of that, and one of the flyers had listed that they needed volunteers to help with a program calling using art as an elective to delinquency. And so, well, this is something I can do. So it's strange. I put that notice on my bulletin board for about 2 months before I had the nerve to make that first phone call. And it kept it was there. So I finally did. And you know, that's my first step of courage. I made the call, and anyway, that's what led into, like I said, it was a series of events. I went in to meet the coordinator. Her name was Tina McKnight, and she was a social worker who headed Abrams Hall, and we started talking about this program. I was going to volunteer, of course, and we just started talking, and the more we talked, it finally came out about my son and the suicide. And lo and behold, Tina had just lost her sister-in-law to suicide only about 4 months previous to that meeting. And so we just started talking about that. And, you know, at that point, because I was still ignorant about suicide prevention and what was being done on the local levels, national levels, but she knew a lot more, and she had researched on the internet and knew about a lot of the national programs. So it was she and I that really just got together, and we wanted to do something. We didn't know what, we didn't know, certainly did not know how. We did the smart thing. We contacted Yellow Ribbon Suicide Prevention Program, which is a national international organization, and they do give training seminars. So we knew that's what we needed because we did not have the tools to do this on our own. So we contacted the organization, which is located in Denver, and Tina and myself flew out there for a very intensive, comprehensive workshop training, you know, that gave us all the tools and resources that we needed. And it was wonderful, step by step, you know, what to do, how to do it. And so after receiving that training, we were very enthusiastic and confident.
And so you mentioned Tina. She was a friend to you because she, like you talked about, it was a friend thing, and she knew what you were going through, and you knew what she was going through, so that you connected in order to start your group. But before we get into actually Zack's Hope, I wanted to talk a little bit more about some of those classes, and because you talked about family to family, and that's kind of the same thing. Families talk with families, friends talk with friends to help people work their way through it. Some of the other classes that you have that you're really excited about is something, a crisis intervention team that's coming soon. Tell me just a little bit about that.
Well, crisis intervention team is a program that was just approved in the legislature this past year. We have a program, and it's going to be unified. So when it's taught throughout the state, everybody will be getting the same program. It's based on the Memphis model, and it's a jail diversion program, and it's also mostly a program of safety for the police officers. If they identify someone that's acting strangely, that they think might have a mental illness or might have a drug or alcohol problem, and they're not being picked up for a serious crime, a lot of times it's just disturbing the peace, or they think it's a domestic abuse, and the spouse will go, yeah, they're just angry and they're out of control, but they haven't hurt me. Then the crisis intervention teams are going to learn de-escalation techniques. They're going to learn how to talk to people who are already hearing people talking to them in their own head. They're getting messages from the television. God is talking to them through the radio, or just.
So these are things that if you don't know how to deal with them, if you don't know what to look for, immediately you're going to assume that they're on some massive drug,
right.
and they may be, because that's one of the symptoms or risk factors, that's drug and alcohol abuse for those who have mental illness or maybe wanting to commit suicide.
So the police will learn how to take them into custody safely, so that the police don't get hurt, so that the person doesn't get hurt, and they're going to be taken immediately for evaluation to see if this is a mental illness. So this way, they're not going to jail first. We're not having our state, local, and county governments are not paying to book people and house them in jails when really they need mental health treatment. Mm-hmm. So they're going to go for that evaluation first. And it's a phenomenal amount of, like, 90% of the people that the CI, or 95% of the people that CIT pick up.
CIT?
Crisis intervention teams.
That's right, sorry.
That these special trained team of officers that they pick up. Most of them will go into treatment. Some of them, even like 10%, can be released back to their families, and the other 80% are like sent to treatment.
Well, this seems like a very important program, like you said, because it might be the intervention and the help that they've needed for a while that they haven't been getting, and maybe possibly keep them from some of the other risk factors that would lead them into a step that you can't return, as in suicide. And these crisis intervention teams, is stigma something that they might be working with, trying to reduce the stigma of mental illness?
Well, hopefully the more education, particularly our police officers, hopefully that will help decrease the stigma. They'll be able to recognize that this is a brain disorder. It's not a character flaw. It's it is an illness, just like diabetes or heart disease. And you can't see it, and that's what freaks people out the most, is when you say it's your mind, we automatically think that they have no intelligence. So yes, it should help decrease the stigma, especially when they see these people later who are in treatment, who have passed that psychotic phase, and they see them fully functioning in the community.
Well, it's really important to help alleviate the stigma, because the stigma makes people not want to talk about it. They don't talk about it. They continue to spiral in their depression or their other form of mental illness, which then leads them, like we said, to do things like suicide. And you took your pain and you did something very positive with it with your friend Tina. The steps began for Zack's Hope, which is your what you did with your pain. So tell me about Zack's Hope.
Okay, well, the program that the Yellow Ribbon that we learned to institute, what I love about the program, it collaborates with the community, with the entire community, not only the mental health professionals, but our primary goal also is education, which is so vitally important. We share so many different goals with each other. But we give gatekeeper trainings, and it's a protocol that you teach. We go into the schools and first talk. It's very important that we emphasize that it's a two-part program. We want to reach the kids naturally. That's our ultimate goal, to train them and help them seek coping skills. But first we have to provide a safety net for when you do contact the youth. You have to have something already set up for them to fall back on. You have to have a procedure, protocol set in motion. So that's why first we go to the administration, the teachers, the parents, actually the entire staff at the schools, school cafeteria workers. You never know who might first recognize these risk signs in the youth in the schools. So it's important that everyone be trained. So we first give the training. It's PowerPoint. It's a very intense training, providing these the school staff with the skills to know how to first of all recognize and pay attention, and then we really emphasize. We're not teaching you to be counselors, because they're naturally, apprehensive about taking on that responsibility. None of us want that responsibility.
Well, no one wants to say something that turns out not to be true.
Exactly. So that's why it's so critically important that we partner with the professionals, with the mental health facilities, which, like Jennifer and with N.A.M.I, we have received wholeheartedly support from Lourdes Mental Health, Four Rivers Mental Health, area psychiatrists, just like your first segment of this show illustrated. And so that's already set in motion, see. So after we train the teachers and give them the tools that they need, it's called gatekeeping, which is exactly what it sounds like. They're the gatekeepers. They just notice. And then it's a school assembly that we talk to the youth, and we want the entire youth to be present, not just the health class or whatever. And it's simple. It's so simple that, you know, that's why it is so successful. And what we were taught, the youth are ready for this information. You know, our generation is the one that we need to, you know, help alleviate those, you know, those stigmas that are associated with suicide and the myths, lots of myths. And so by the time we talk to the youth and just really stress, you know, it's important to open up, to talk. What I like about the program also, it makes it, I hate to use the word almost casual, but you know, that's important because that helps open it up where these kids we know they're feeling these feelings, and they're, you know, already a lot of them, a scary statistic, 20% of all high school students have seriously considered suicide within a 1 year span. Now that's very frightening. And 8% will attempt it. And so they are thinking about it. And so when they find that this is, you know, something that's an open topic, and it's not just so, you
taboo.
know, yeah, and because they're holding these feelings inside, they feel very like no one will understand.
Well, I mean, and can you blame them? Because
No.
they're young children. I mean, adults have a hard time talking about what's going on in their lives and what's going on in their children's lives. So it's hard to, you know, to talk about it when you're young. You have enough going on in your life as it is. And to come back to you, Jennifer, you know firsthand how important it is for groups like Zack's Hope to be into the schools, because you mentioned earlier that your children also have a mental illness, because we know from our shows that there is a genetic predisposition to mental illness. How important it is to you for them to do these types of programs?
Well, I think it's wonderful, and I was going to ask, Sharee, after you let the kids know it's okay to discuss this, then what do they do? You know, I have a child that gets, you know, it's the stress and it's that exams, and he goes into a depression, a real bad funk, and he has a friend who has depression. So that's the only reason why I ever found out, is because he felt comfortable to talk about it, because he and his friend talked about it. So then what do they do?
Well, one of the tools that we provide for the students, and I brought this card, and this it's an interesting story behind the card. Actually, it's just called Be a Link to Save a Life, and here.
Okay.
And one side, the first side of the card. Well, first of all, let me explain. During the assembly, they're passed out to all of the students. All right, they all receive this card. The first side of the card explains that when you feel that you need help, but you just don't know who to turn to, you just simply give that card to someone. And remember, we've already set up the protocol for what to happen for, you know, the teachers, the counselors, the you know, administrative, the staff, or parent. It could be anybody, another student naturally, or a parent. When someone else receives the card, on the other side of the card explains to that person what to do. Most specifically is stay with them, and just help them get to the next link. Remember, it's called Be a Link, and it's got numbers provided right there on the card for them to call. And you know, I have to be very honest, when I first heard of this card, it seemed silly to me. It's like, who's going to have a card and give it away? And it's not. It's so simple. It's just something that the youth has in possession. Number one, it's got the numbers that they themselves can call if they ever feel like it. It shows them that people care, people are ready, there's help. And one thing that N.A.M.I, of the organization, explained that was phenomenal to me, they go to schools like with 2,000-3,000 students, some of these larger schools, they pass out these cards. And she said, absolutely, after every school assembly, there's not a single card on the floor or in the trash can. The kids keep the cards. And then they use them because they have, you know, statistics, like I said, the yellow ribbon, over 52,000 cards have been used for youth to ask for help. It's a simple thing. I think what it does mostly is just allow students to know that you're not alone. We recognize that you might be having these feelings and thoughts. They don't think that, they don't believe that. So that in itself is a huge thing.
It is a big
And one of the
hurdle.
things we teach the parents is to open the dialogue with your student, whether you notice those signs that we talked about before or not. Every parent needs to talk to their student, their son or daughter about suicide, very casually, just, you know, hey, I learned about Yellow Ribbon today, and I heard how the program works. Do you have any friends that you think have ever thought about, and of course, draw them in slowly. They won't give names at first if they do, and then you can even say, you know, is this something you've ever thought about?
Well, this is what Jennifer said. That's how you found out about your son, was because he had a friend.
Right, and I had said he couldn't have. I saw one of his friends, and I said, I know that guy's like 6'2", and he was so hunched down and bent over, and he was practically dragging. He says, well, Mom, you know, he's had depression for years. And I thought,
and how
wow.
amazing that he would even know to say that.
Right.
That he would even know to call it that.
And see, that's what's so good about N.A.M.I. Right now we're in Paducah, we have a support group, and it's for adults. But that's what we talk about. When you have these feelings, which a lot of people with mental illness do, and I've had them myself, you need a plan. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're giving these kids. You're giving them a plan. And that's what we like to do. We like to talk about, what do you do when you're in crisis? And you need to plan for it before you get there, you know. Who do you want me to call? What are there medicines that work best for you that you've tried in the past? Things that maybe high schoolers haven't had, but people who've been in the mental health system for a while may have ideas that, you know, these medicines work for me when I'm really down, and I only have to have them as an add-on to my regular treatment until I feel better. So support groups are wonderful. They're lifelines.
Yes, they are. And give the meeting times for N.A.M.I again.
It's every Thursday night from 7 to 8:30 at St. Matthew Lutheran Church on 27th and Broadway.
Okay. And are there phone numbers? Can you give a phone number and possibly maybe your email address if someone wanted to contact you?
They want to contact me. They email namipaducah@yahoo.com.
Okay.
Our phone number is 443-3448. And I hope that's right, because I never dial it. But
Right.
you'll get the information about our meetings, and then you'll also get a number of someone to call to talk to right now. If you need to talk to someone right now, there'll be a number on that.
And it is a national organization, and it is N.A.M.I. I believe NAMI.org is the national organization. If you wanted to go on, if possibly you had a loved one in another state, if you're watching this program, and there's one is it in all 50 states?
I think we're everywhere. I think we're in all 50 states. We have 22 affiliates in Kentucky. Anybody can come. I had someone call me yesterday actually and said, now how much does it cost to come to the meetings? You could come to the meetings for free. We do ask if you want to be a member and help us support our educational and our outreach efforts. It's $35 a year for a family. But a lot of people are on limited income or disability, and we only ask for $3 a piece.
But if you can't afford to pay, we wouldn't discourage anyone to come and to
Right.
be a part of NAMI and
It's
to
all
talk.
free, and all the classes we give are free. The money just helps us buy information. We have lots of pamphlets. We have a table with information set up every week, and it just helps us. Buy more supplies and materials.
Their contact number for Zack's Hope?
Yes, we have a website, which is zackshope.com, And if you visit the website, you can get the information for contacts, including the national organization Yellow Ribbon. There's lots of other resource links, and the telephone number to reach Zack's Hope representative would be 618-319-0324. And of course that will be on the website also. And information there also about our support group.
Let's talk, I just have a question, and for each of you actually. Does Zack's Hope, starting with you, does it continue to help you heal?
Oh, positively. And in fact, what we find, they're interlinked, the support group and Zack's Hope. I know it's a little confusing to understand that there are two separate groups, but survivors become the best volunteers. They're the ones that have the passion and the understanding. And so through the process of the support group, which our objective is to help survivors. That's the main, to help them onto the road to recovery. And we don't try to recruit them, of course, to Zack's Hope. But a lot of times what happens, you develop friendships naturally. And there's spin-off meetings that we have besides the monthly meeting. And then, of course, members start becoming and I've watched it happen, and it's a beautiful thing, actually. They're very tentative to start. They're still in that shell and not in mainstream society yet. And just having this purpose and cause and for them to understand the educational part of suicide prevention helped me a lot, because it helped me understand that depression is an illness and all those things. And so, they start volunteering and becoming actually the core of suicide of Zack's Hope. But the community has been overwhelmingly supportive, Paducah, and I'm just so happy and thrilled. I didn't know what to expect, but when we had our first, I call it task force meeting, we had so many people, representatives, community leaders, and organizations. And like I had mentioned before, all the mental health facilities are so very supportive. And they attend the gatekeeping seminars that we give to the schools too, because we want those schools to realize, it's just not your responsibility. That's very scary for them.
Intimidating.
But here's the links. Here's where you can get help. Here's where you can direct.
To give them the lines of communication, where they need to go and where they need to be. To have that plan ready to go.
Exactly.
As part of N.A.M.I, how does it help you to deal with your own mental illness and to help you to,
It is, I hear this almost every week. Someone will come in and they'll go, I can't believe I'm in a room full of people that are just like me, that understand me, that accept me for, because it's scary for your family members. And sometimes you can't, you can't tell your spouse that you just wish you were dead or wish you could die. Not so much that, that you have a plan and you want to carry it out, but just that, you're in pain and you just want to be rid of the pain. And it's wonderful to be with other people who have been there, and you share your stories about how you left that place and how you've moved on.
and how to get to the other side.
How to get to the other side. But, recovery isn't just a straight line. It's kind of circular. I mean, you get better, and then you get worse, and then you get better, and
that's okay.
And that is okay.
Because
Absolutely.
some people think if I go down again, then I'm down and I'm not going to get back. And so they don't want to get to the good side of the circle. So.
And we have a lot of advocacy events that I didn't even know existed. I mean, Kentucky has a mental health CAC, Consumer Advisory Council, and they meet quarterly, and there's a lot of people there, a lot of consumers who've taken and become certified as peer support specialists, because they say it really is people who've been there, it really is your peers who can help you the most recover. So there are people who have taken that class, people who've taken a leadership class, people who already have ties to mental health or other people in your community with mental illness. They meet 4 times a year in Frankfurt, and you have, the head of the Department of Mental Health and people over housing, and you get to find out what's going on at the state level, how they're addressing your issues, and you get to have a voice, and it's wonderful. And there are other events like that too. I never knew that anybody in my government cared about me with a mental illness or was looking after my
we
insurance needs.
Well,
Yeah.
but you don't know who is feeling the same way as you.
Right.
So those local government, the federal government, people, no one is exempt from mental illness. No one is exempt from suicide. So I'm glad to hear that those things are going on. But who knows what other people are going through? Nobody knows, and so it's very important that we do have those things going on. And maybe that's why, because they also have someone that they love that has a mental illness, or someone that they love that's committed suicide. So they're advocates, maybe not outwardly, but with some of the laws that maybe they can help create, and some of the legislature that they can do. I just want to talk briefly about, before we get to this beautiful quilt, the other group that you're talking about, the SOS group. And in a few minutes, I'm going to talk with Karen Winkel, who is the co-facilitator of that group at the United Church of Paducah, and her perspective on why it's important. But you also started the SOS group, Sharee, and you talked about that they're different from Zack's Hope. But why did you feel the need to start the survivor support group?
Well, actually, I started it for myself.
Okay, why?
I had gone at the time when I was reaching out for help, and had heard of a grief support group, so I went, a local group, and so I attended that meeting, in fact, several times. Didn't fit in. It was so, these are all members that had lost loved ones to death, most of them illnesses. And in fact, I have to be honest, it almost made me feel more ostracized, because their loved one had been fighting for their life. My loved one chose to throw it away. I mean, simplified, that's what it may have seemed like. So it was very difficult. I could not connect, and I felt like they didn't understand. And so I had learned that there was a group that had started, and like you said, you will be talking with Karen Winkel later about the group at the United Church of Paducah. So I went to talk with her. She had just become the new pastor, and this group was about to peter out. There were only 2 members, and so I attended the first meeting, and come to find out, I found myself higher on the road to recovery than those, because their losses had been more recent. Because see, this had been about 2.5 years afterward, and so at first it's wonderful to be with people that understand. There's so many reasons for that. The stigma is erased, so you don't, none of us even think about that like we do talking with others. And you feel safe. You feel like you can express all your emotions, no matter what they are, and they won't be judged, or even you won't be tried to be talked out of them, and all those different components. And so the support group kind of progressed, and with my own recovery, and it made me much stronger. And then I found that I wanted to help these individuals, and so then I started studying more about support groups, because it's kind of like the suicide prevention. I didn't know they had existed. I didn't know what that you can get training, and that there are resources, and because besides coming in and being with each other and sharing your stories, which is all important, I think the goal is to help each other get better. And so I like to have a positive, something that we can discuss, a way, goals, challenges, ideas. So we always incorporate that in each of our meetings. And, the meetings are open to the public naturally. It's hard to get the word out. And so I always appreciate opportunities like this, because survivors aren't, the ones that are reading the newspaper every day and watch. I mean, you just have to understand they're isolated, but family members and other people can maybe notice and help them know about our support groups. And so that's how it came about. And it's kind of with my former job of teaching. I was always one step ahead of my students. And I think, just helping myself so that I could help them. And
Stay one step ahead.
And then that's what happens in the group. You form relationships. At first you're all strangers, and you know what? That's helpful too, because the people that you come in and talk with are not biased already against, wanting specifically to make you like you were. We talked about that, little things like that before. But just to have fresh people that, more objective. And so what happens, and I've watched it happen, the dynamics is the ones that are the most crushed and hurt in the very early stages, they become stronger, and then they start reaching out to the other members.
Right.
And
So it's a cycle.
So beautiful.
It's a cycle that happens. Probably the same thing with
Then it helps
N.A.M.I.
them, yes.
Yes.
The cycle happens because one helps another, and then it grows from there. We don't want to forget about the beautiful quilt that is also a healing tool for those who have lost loved ones to suicide. If we just open it right here. It's truly, truly beautiful. And Sharee, just briefly, about 4 minutes, tell us just a little bit about the quilt.
Well, this is part of a national organization also sponsored by the Suicide Prevention Action Network. And I learned about it on their internet site. And it's SOS groups across the country have a coordinator that helps get this started, and I'm a quilter, so this was easy for me. And it's just a beautiful, wonderful way to not only help survivors feel the pride, and it's a part of healing for them to provide the pictures of the ones that they loved that they had lost to suicide. And the quilts are warm, always associated with loving family. Quilts inject that emotion in a lot of people.
And this is part of quilts. They're all over the country, right?
All over the country. In fact, people can visit that website and view other quilts that have been made. But basically, what we do, we scan the photographs that the members provide, and volunteers from our group actually help put it together, which is a fun and
our group. Which
good
group? Zack's
social.
Hope.
From
Zack's
both,
Hope.
actually.
From both the suicide.
Remember,
okay.
they start getting integrated.
That's right.
And so those become fun social days also.
And the saying, "This keepsake memory quilt serves as a touching visual reminder of so many friends and family members who were lost to suicide." And one we see up here is of course your son Zack.
Yes, that's my son Zack here, and then Sheila. This is the Tina's sister-in-law who also helped to start the organization.
Okay.
And another thing that this quilt does really help show is when we take it to our forums for the suicide, different public awareness programs that we have, and put them on display, it draws in people, the public. It's a wonderful self-awareness tool because pictures speak 1,000 words.
It puts a face. It says, by putting a face on suicide, these quilts help carry the message that preventing suicide is not just about lowering statistics. Preventing suicide is about saving the lives of mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and people we love.
And I know we've thrown around statistics, which are critically important for people to understand, but when you associate the statistics with the actual people.
We don't want to lose the people
It's very dramatic. People understand immediately. Wow, these are
the people
normal
that we love.
people.
That's
I hate
right.
to say that, but really that's the point that gets across.
Well, we've run out of time, and I want to thank both of you for coming. Thank you, Jennifer and Sharee. I appreciate all of your work that you are doing to help educate about mental illness and suicide. Stay with us. I'll be back with Karen Winkel, who is the co-facilitator of the Survivors of Suicide group at the United Church of Paducah. She'll give the times of the meetings and the place and all the information you need. Get your pen and paper, and we'll be right back. Thank you for joining me, Karen. I have with me Karen Winkel, who is the SOS Support Group Facilitator. And I would just like to talk to you just a few minutes about how you got involved with facilitating the support group for the suicide survivors.
Well, at United Church of Paducah, the pastor who preceded me was a woman who had professional experience with suicide and also personal experience with suicide. So part of her ministry at United Church of Paducah was to establish the suicide survivors group and bringing with her that professional experience and personal experience to minister to those in our area who have experienced the loss of a loved one or friend by suicide. Suicide is so stigmatized, and the grief of suicide so particular that a typical grief group does not meet the need of someone who's lost someone to suicide. So I would say 5 years ago the group was established, and when I came to Paducah to serve the church, one of the church's questions to me was, would you be willing to facilitate this group? In principle, I was interested because this was their ministry and they wanted to be sure that that continued. In principle, I was supportive, but in particular, I felt equipped to do that because in addition to the training I have as a minister, I also have a master's degree in counseling. Okay. Now that said, the group is not a therapeutic group. It is, therapy isn't happening. It is really a support group, and so people come as they are and receive what they will from the group, but we're not doing psychotherapy with those who come.
So come as you are, where you are. Everybody's in different places.
Exactly, and some people come and their loss is quite recent, and some people come and that loss occurred many, many years ago, and whoever wants to can come and is received exactly as they are with no expectations for the grief process. Each grief is so particular, is so unique. So we accept each other as we are and don't insist that anyone be like anyone else.
Well, we really realized that in the second show that we did on suicide. We had three people here, and each story was different, and each experience was different, and each way that they reacted was so different. And that's why it's so important to have these groups. How do you go about getting this going? How do you do what you do at these groups?
Well, I mean, we rely partly on opportunities like this to publicize the group because loss by suicide is so stigmatized that getting the word out takes a lot of doing. I've gone to health fairs to promote the group, and I was not prepared for the amount of distancing that the average person needed to do, even with the idea of the group. Oh, that's not in my family. That hasn't happened to me. And so I try to speak to everyone I can to say, you may have a neighbor who's been affected, you may have a coworker who's been affected. Just getting the word out takes a little bit of doing. But there is, over the course of the 5 years, there is a better network of information. And then with Zack's Hope, which Sharee Dawn will be talking about, there is kind of this help that each group gives the other group in getting that word out. But every night is different, and it depends partly on who comes. Some nights there are a few, and some nights there are lots. And there's a strong emphasis in the group on simply just sharing our stories and kind of checking in, because a person who had a horrible night the previous month might have gotten out of that trough and be feeling some relief and more hope themselves in that grieving process. So we don't know from month to month who we're going to have or where people are going to be in that healing process. So we use a very organic style. And
well, let me ask you this, because it is at a church and some people may be uncomfortable with that. How do you do? What would you say to that?
One of the reasons that I think it's important that the church offer this, and our church in particular, is that there are many theological stances around suicide that I do not believe, and the church does not believe, are responsible. So one of the things that we want to do as part of that healing process is to unburden people of theologies that are not compassionate. because there are some theologies around suicide that do not aid in the grieving process, that are, we would not want anyone burdened, as they're dealing with the loss of their loved one. We would want to give them hope. We would want to give them consolation that God's love is big enough to embrace even suicide. And that is part of the ministry of that church. We don't interject theology into that healing circle, but certainly one of the things that I'm wanting to do is to be sure that that is addressed if that should come up.
I want to just go back briefly about the stigma that goes along with that. I mean, you experience it just going and trying to promote the support group. So you can imagine what survivors have to go through with the fact that they don't want to talk about it or don't want anyone else, to talk about it for fear that they will maybe think bad about their loved one or about them even. So that's why this support group is very important, so that other people can talk about those experiences as well.
Yeah, exactly, because so often folks are not feeling free to speak about their loss with folks who are frightened by suicide. I mean, our culture does not understand suicide very well, and the ways in which it reflects not a person's flawed nature or their selfishness, but their very legitimate neurophysiological reality that would put them in a place where suicide would seem to them to be the only choice. This is a culture that doesn't understand that. And so the folks that are gathering are really gathering to have an opportunity, and it's so small, just 2 hours once a month, but to say whatever they want to say, or to say nothing and not have to explain that. To have it be completely understood and affirmed and recognized as part of each of those people's process of healing, to just be free. How healing that is, to be able to know that you don't have to explain it, and you don't have to take care of anybody while you're sharing your grief, or you don't have to respond to their unspoken fears or concerns.
And you can say the things that you can't say other times.
Exactly.
And that's important, because sometimes just to verbalize the things that you're afraid to say is very healing. So tell us when the support group meets.
We meet the first Tuesday of every month from 7 to 9 p.m. in the parlor of the church, and anybody who wanted to know more could call me at the church, United Church of Paducah, at 442-3722.
Again, please.
442-3722. And lots of times folks call me before a meeting, and that gives me an opportunity to just kind of tell them what they might expect, and answer questions and alleviate any concerns that they have. The group is confidential, so we don't publicize the names of those who are coming, and we make a pledge to one another to not discuss after the group what has been shared, although the folks that gather know that implicitly anyway.
So that's where are you located? Just
We're
in case they don't want to call, they just want to stop by.
We're at 4600 Buckner Lane, so that would be between Audubon and Pines Road on Buckner on the west end. And somebody would know where to find us because they would hear the voices and see the cars. Yeah.
Okay. Well, just in the last few minutes, on a personal note, why is this important to you?
Well, I think, Jesus lived to reach out to those who were hurting, who felt like they were among the last and the least. And for me, this is a really vital ministry, because each of the people in that group has so much to give, and God is so present in this process. And for me, even though I may not be speaking to that directly as the group meets, I know that God is with them every step of the way, and I want to be a witness to that process. And for me personally, there's so much sensitivity that I have gained to that most misunderstood and unappreciated grief. There is no grief like the grief related to a loss by suicide, and I'm taught every time we meet about the preciousness of life and the courage that people have to face what they would never seek out.
Well, I appreciate that. That's very well said. Thank you for joining me. And the previous guest, all of you, I thank them for joining me as well, even though they're not here with us now. But I appreciate what you do. Please give again when you meet and where and what time.
It's at United Church of Paducah, 4600 Buckner Lane, the first Tuesday of every month from 7 to 9 p.m. And anybody who wants to talk to me about it can call 442-3722.
Again, come as you are, where you are.
Exactly.
Thank you, Karen. I appreciate it. Thank you for joining me. This is the last of the 3-part series on suicide. Please, if you've gotten anything from the 3 shows that we've done, do not suffer alone. Please reach out, talk to people, get help. Suicide is not the answer. We appreciate all my guests, and I appreciate you watching. I'll see you next time on Healthy Living.